Good morning, everyone. We are welcoming you. Glad so many of you have been joining us for a Bible study. They're very important. So we welcome you to our Bible study this morning. It is Saturday, September 15th, 2018. And we are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And this morning, our moderator is Eddie from California.
All right. The quote for the Bible study is, "The central fact of the Bible is the superiority of spiritual over physical power." And that's from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, page 131.
Thank you. Any comments on that? I think that's why Mrs. Eddy got so much from the Bible, because that's what she saw, that's what she was looking for. The human mind just looks at it humanly and makes it seem like a bunch of thugs fighting with each other or something like that, rather than seeing spiritually what's happening, your spiritual sense working. And that is really what we are doing here at this Bible study.
That's why the so-called intellectual human mind will often poo-poo or question whether the things in the Bible really happened or not, because it can't understand the superiority of spiritual things.
Doesn't even think it exists. Anyone else?
I think it's the strongest message for us all in all this, because if we are not moving away from the false sense of materiality, then we're not really doing anything.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think this is a very reassuring statement, because people feel they're at the mercy of matter, and this just completely reverses that. So concise and beautiful.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Okay. Eddie?
Okay, we'll go on. The topic is, what's the matter? And the Bible readings were from Luke 8:22 to 39. And question 1, what happened when Jesus and his disciples crossed the lake?
Okay. Do you want to read those few?
I'm sorry, what?
Bruce will read the 22 to 25.
Okay.
Now it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and he said unto them, Let us go over unto the other side of the lake. And they launched forth. But as they sailed, he fell asleep. And there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water, and were in jeopardy. And they came to him, and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose, and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. He said unto them, Where is your faith? They, being afraid, wondered, saying one to another, What manner of man is this? For he commandeth even the winds and water, and they obey him.
Thank you. Okay, who would like to tell us what happened in their own words, now that we read it? Who wants to add?
Well, in Matthew Henry, he said that they that observe Christ's orders may assure themselves of his presence. And it was Christ's business to lay storms. He delights to do it, for he came to proclaim peace on earth.
Thank you.
Well, they obeyed Jesus' command to go across. But when he was sleeping, then the opposition to this right idea came up, and they hadn't learned yet, apparently, how to handle animal magnetism and stand their ground with God. They were fortunate to have Jesus with them. They woke him. He did the rebuke the malicious thought that stirred up this violent wind, and it stopped, and the storm therefore released. But this is one of the main things that we have, Christian Science, is to learn something of animal magnetism and how to handle it with the power of God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This reminded me of a story I heard a while ago, way back when Tiger Woods was still considered a good guy. He would go to driving ranges and practice, and everybody around him started doing way better. And they called it the Tiger Woods effect. And then when he left, they went back to whatever level they were at previously. So this has got me thinking, he just, took a nap or whatever, and they just lost it.
And they went to sleep.
They went to sleep. So.
Well, I think Tiger Woods is still a good guy. He'll ever be a good guy in my eyes, rightly or wrongly. Dear.
This reminds me when you're in the human mind and something happens, a lot of times you get all anxious and upset and react. But Jesus, he was calm and peaceful because he knew the truth. I thought that was a good lesson. If something comes up, don't react to it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think this example is clear instruction that the violent wind is malicious thought. Jesus woke up and rebuked this malice, and it stopped.
That's what we're doing and watching for this supposed hurricane.
Thank you, Fairley.
That's right. That's what we should be doing.
Tomorrow we're going to talk quite a bit at the round table about handling weather, what it's all about. We've all had first-hand experience this week with it, and in other storms too. But and wonderful things written on the forum about it, what Mrs. Eddy said about it, how you're not a Christian Scientist until you do handle the weather.
So what did Jesus' disciples think about this storm?
Well, they thought they all were going to die.
Really powerful.
Yeah, they thought it was a normal and natural occurrence, something to be expected, something that is inevitable. And if you happen to be unfortunate enough to be caught by it, well, it can be a very dangerous thing.
I read the Sea of Galilee. It's a very large body of water. It's got mountains around it, and that kind of a storm comes up quickly and often and rapidly. It wasn't just like a small little lake or anything. They were. Well, I read some interesting things about how you can apply this in facing your own storms in your life. Sharon said, I mean, what is your reaction? I mean, here they had Christ Jesus on their ship, for heaven's sake. And they became terrified. When something, I mean, even this hurricane that Fairley said seems to be, your first reaction, fear, and oh my gosh. Ask yourself, it's a testing ground for your faith. I also read, this was interesting, maybe Tom knows, but what I read was this was the only time in the Bible that it said Jesus was asleep. I don't remember any other time either. I wondered if it was, well, maybe a little deliberate, see how they would do without him. And they fell apart immediately.
I think Mrs. Eddy gives us something in Science and Health in Christian Science Practice, page 421, talking about the side title is How to Treat a Crisis. So in other words, whenever any form of crisis occurs, insist vehemently on the great fact which covers the whole ground that God, Spirit, is all, and that there is none beside him. I think this is the calm that Christ Jesus brought to every crisis, so-called.
Thank you. She also says somewhere that Christian scientists will be calm under situations like that, knowing as they should that, as Lawrence said, that God is all, the only power. So you can test yourself, because it's very important that you have this kind of faith and remain strong and calm. The other thing it said about the faith was a storm in your life can reveal your distorted view of the problem. When something happens, is the first thing they said, we're perishing, we're all dying.
The worst
thing, is that how you react? As Sharon said, you react with, oh my God, this is the worst thing, I'm going to die. It's going to be terrible. I mean, I hear it all the time, and I'm sure I've done it many times in my past. Think the very worst. So recognize this, and recognize this is not how to do it, okay? Not how to do it, not what the Christ does.
There's something my kids say once in a while. I don't know where they got it from, but it's, well, that escalated quickly. So.
Right. That's right. And you saw that with the storm this week. Oh, it's going to be Category 5, and it's going to be biblical proportions. This is what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. And this is why in the same paragraph she talks about, when there's a disease or whatever is happening, treat first the mental disturbance. It's not so much even the disease, but the mental disturbance about it is to be addressed first.
Yes. Thank you. That's exactly right.
I think at some point, I used to be fearful for various things, but at some point you realize that doesn't serve you well at all to go down that route. So I don't even give in to fear, because it just doesn't serve you. So when you can stand porter at the door of thought, and when the suggestion of fear comes in, can throw it right out and remain calm. Because being fearful doesn't really allow you to do anything productive.
It's a very good point, yes.
Right, and because what does fear show? If you accept the fear, stay fearful, well, what does it show in your thoughts?
You have no faith.
You distrust the allness of God, Christ's presence.
Thank you, Florence. You're making a God of something other than the one God. That's why it doesn't serve you, because there is no other God that can serve you. And you overcome fear, how?
Turning to God.
Yeah.
What does John say?
Perfect love.
Perfect love casting out fear. The disciples hadn't learned what perfect love is yet. And what is perfect love? Well, we're all working at it, aren't we? Yeah. Perfect love is the same love that God has, that God is for us. To love God with all your heart and soul. To love the truth with all your heart and soul. and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's why we need to know what God is. We need to know what it is that we're supposed to love. That's why the synonyms are absolutely essential to that understanding.
The storms in your life, this goes along with this too, can reveal, how your self-focus is. Are you concerned for your brother man, or are you just concerned for yourself? Every man for himself. Wonderful in situations like we were having this week to see the first responders, all the people. I've heard some people haven't slept in 48 hours. That's because they love. And because they love, they overcome their fears and their everything else. They jump into action to help others. While others might just be trying to hoard everything they have or just all about self. So, and when you love something besides yourself, you won't be afraid. You will jump into action. Yes, you will. The fear leaves you. And then the storms reveal our view of Christ Jesus. Because after storm was calmed, what did they say to him?
They said one to another, "Wow, what manner of man is this? Even the winds and waves obey him."
Yeah, who the heck is this guy?
Yeah.
I find that very interesting because we'll go, there's a lot in the next story too. I don't want to dwell too long on this one. But what did the demons say when they were confronted with the Christ?
Leave us alone.
Well, and what else?
Thou son of...
Yeah.
Thou son of God.
You come here to torment me? The Son of God?
They saw who he was.
But they recognize, yes.
Yes. And the disciples said, who the heck is this guy? And yet the demon said, wow, it's the Son of God right in front of me. So I find that very interesting. And we'll get into that as we move along. So anyone else on this story before we go into the next one?
Another thing that struck out to me was the impersonal nature of this whole thing. Jesus could speak very fiercely in rebuking the wind because he knew it was an impersonal, but it was error, but it was impersonal. So he gave it all he had. Remember Mr. Evans teaching us, the nice thing you can do about the errors that come to your thought is you can be really brutal with them. Because it's wrong thought. Be brutal with them and rebuke them. You're not pointing the finger at any other person. You're pointing the finger at error itself. And it deserves nothing less than total destruction. So,
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. You have to be.
So don't be nice.
Yep, error's not nice to you. It's called aggressive for a reason. You can't be passive and pleasant with it. You've got to be tough with it and prove its nothingness. So doing.
And Mrs. Evans had taught to say God's good immediately when something would come up that would cause fear, like if you tripped or if something, if something untoward happened that you would immediately be filled with fear. But it's such a great thing to immediately declare God's good, and your thought is filled with it's turned around to know that God has only good things in store for us, so I don't need to believe this suggestion of something bad that just happened. And I have found that to be so helpful. Keep your thought on God and to not be taken in by what might be a fall, or I can't think of other things that might cause fear. It can be something in a car or something you see on the road. God's good. God has only good in store for his children. It gets your thought right back on track, not to be taken in by the testimony of the material senses. I love that. I love learning that. It's so simple and so helpful.
Thank you, Suzanne. Immediately turn your thought to God. Just shout, God's good. Don't let it even start. It is very helpful, and that's why. So remember this. If you ever get gripped with fear, whatever, doctor's verdict, something you hear, something you see on the news, don't let yourself get gripped with fear. Remember these thoughts, declaring God's allness, not the truth. You'll find yourself calming the storm. Oh.
Are we ready to go on?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Question number 2. What was the man's situation that met Jesus when he went forth to land? That was Luke 8:26 through 29.
Well, he met a man who had devils a long time and was living in the tomb.
And he was very strong and was too strong for the chains that they tried to use to keep him bound, and so he didn't hurt, I guess, himself or others. And in Matthew, it said that the people wouldn't even go. It's the same story about the swine. It's in Mark, Matthew, and Luke. But in that part, they say that people wouldn't even walk by that way.
It was like an urban legend back then. it was so crazy, he didn't even wear clothes.
I read the word legion. Legion was a Roman army unit of about 6,000 soldiers and symbolized Roman power. Think of that. The Romans were known to be the human, all-powerful at that time, right? Strong and mighty. Shows what was arrayed against the Christ. And it also mentions that the man had lost his identity to the demon. He bears their name and was controlled by their seeming power.
That's what he called himself, Legion.
He did. It had totally taken him over. He is a good example, a good reminder of what will happen when you allow that insidious voice to start speaking to you. And you don't stop it.
I think it's like, sorry.
That's where it's going. Just take a look at that. Is that what you want to become? Go ahead.
It's like he totally forgot that he was who he truly was and identified with all these demons or habits or whatever it is, or craziness, mental illness, whatever you want to call it. He was identifying with that and calling himself that, being convinced that that was he was, instead of, he forgot totally who he really was, the child of God.
Thank you.
And I think this is why our conversations with ourselves, or what comes and what we accept about ourselves, is so important in changing how we think. And the emphasis on it, it's all about thought. What am I thinking? What am I holding in thought about myself? And, of course, about everyone else. So, what does it say? Let your conversations be in heaven. No? It has to be right, whatever we accepting. It's interesting how much we keep saying, oh, I've always been like this, or this happened, so I'm like this, and all that. It's part of this. It leads to the tormented thought.
Absolutely.
how can we relate this story? I was just thinking there's so much talk in the news about mental health. We need more mental health care providers. We have a huge problem in this country of mental health, and it's just constantly in the news whenever something, a shooting happens, and it's like, oh, we don't have enough mental health treatment out there. But I don't see that as providing, those comments are not providing anything constructive. So what can we do as Christian Scientists when we hear this talk about needing more mental health? In our thought, we must declare there's one mind, and all of God's ideas reflect the one mind, and everyone in reality is in their right mind. That's what comes to me.
Yeah, because what is mental illness?
Deranged thinking, opposite thinking of what's true.
Yeah, and what causes it? I mean, it has no cause in reality, but what?
Again, I think it's persistent wrong thinking, because I've seen something that was, it really illustrates this. A friend of mine who had very, abuse situations, sexual as well as a child, and she really never got over that. And now it got to the point where, of course, they now said, oh, it's Alzheimer's and all that. But it seems to me like it's the perpetual, sadness and whatever the disturbance was from that experience is what ended up like this. It brings tears to my eyes sometimes thinking about it, that she could never get over this. And now, of course, they'll put a label on it. It's such and such. But I feel that if that pain had been healed, that disturbance had been healed, she probably wouldn't have ended up like this.
Yeah, I had someone tell me recently, it was Parthens, who studies all different things, but he was saying very often mental illness and that it stems from some kind of physical abuse as a child. That would seem to be some human cause for it. So we know that the only answer to that is in science, in knowing that if it wasn't good, it never happened, in divine mind. These are truths you can prove for yourself. We have people in our church who have done this and who have changed their lives. Luann is one in particular. I don't know if she wants to speak.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, well, most of you know.
I did want to say that it is the truth that actually sets you free from all of that, just knowing the truth. And when I came into science and started hearing the truth from my practitioner, and it was like I immediately recognized the reality of the truth that she was giving to me. So I think that was like a big spark that just sent all that stuff scurrying, just like with this guy in this story.
Thank you.
You try to actually fight back against the truth, but it doesn't work. The truth is very powerful, and I think that's the saving grace in that whole thing. Just learning the truth.
Thank you, Luann.
And I think it's important to recognize. I mean, you're right, wrong thought, but I think it's important to recognize that the mental state that results in mental illness is self-will.
Mrs. Evans would teach us it was selfishness and willfulness that indulged in, continually seems to also result in mental illness. That's why she felt children, particularly, if you see those traits of selfishness and willfulness in a child, to correct it early on so it doesn't seem to grow or manifest. And it can be, and only in science can be, and it's never too late to deal with any of these areas. And Mrs. Eddy says in Science and Health, mental illness is easier to heal than other things because it is mental. And to go back to Suzanne's point, people are uncomfortable with talking about demons, and the Bible says cast out demons. And she was talking about mental illness. Well, isn't that what all of this is? It's a form of demon, something that's possessing a person. Now, I looked up the word in the Urban Dictionary, demon, because the Urban Dictionary is what the modern people would say about it, and they do call it depression, anorexia, things that have people by the tail and they can't seem to get loose. Addiction, certainly all addictions are demons, and they have to be cast out. And to her point, how do you do that? Really, the only way to do it thoroughly and completely is through the Christ. And I know, the grocery store we go to, every once in a while there'll be people asking for money, and they are people who have had addictions. And their freedom came when they learned about God. It's a God-based charity. And when they learned about God, then they were able to thoroughly get free of this addiction, this belief. But we call it a demon. There's nothing wrong with calling it a demon. We don't have to be uncomfortable with that. And the Christians have said, toehold, foothold, stronghold. You let the demon continue in you. You listen to it. You let it tell it all of its terrible lies. And then pretty soon you're entrenched in something, in belief. But the truth can set you free. At the end of this session, I want Florence to read Ways That Are Vain. Mrs. Eddy in miscellaneous writing, she has admonitions and counsel. The first one is what our leader says, and all of you should be very familiar with that. That, beloved Christian Scientists, keep your minds so filled with truth and love that sin, disease, and death cannot enter them. That is the answer. It goes on very specifically. We can read that too. And then Ways That Are Vain. This is how the scientist handles it. You have to handle it first within your own consciousness, and then you can help others as well. But it's certainly needed because we hear about it all the time on the news. The opioid epidemic, yes. Other things. Too bad Jeffrey's not here today. So it's important. These sessions are extremely important. It's making the Bible alive to us and practical. The other thing I read, and I thought this was interesting too, I read it, as Linda said, there are 3 accounts of this story in the Bible. But I read where the 2 other accounts said that there were 2 men. This one only says 1. And this was the one that was healed to the point he was sitting at the feet of Jesus. So I don't know what happened to the other one. But I just say this because people are always saying, well, why isn't he healed all the time? And why isn't this? And why isn't that? And why doesn't the storm just stop when we waved our hands and said to stop? What's the matter? Well, if you want that to happen, you do it. So, I mean, we missed a class because we didn't have the round table, but in that Bible story of that week, it talked about Jesus was addressing. There were a lot of people that weren't healed in his time.
In his town.
In his town, yes. So get over that part, okay? Let's get over that part. Let's rejoice that this one guy was healed. And shows if one can do it, all can do it. Why the others aren't, I don't know. If you want to tell me, I'll listen right now.
But not for very long.
And eventually they're all healed. Sooner or later they will be. Because that's what a good God we have. It's never the truth. But I just, when people get stuck on that part, I find it not helpful.
So that's why we go after the receptive stuff. Right?
Yes, absolutely. The one that was healed and sat at the feet of Jesus was extremely receptive.
I love this story because here's a man who evidently had some amazing physical strength. And at the end, he was sitting at the feet of Jesus. And that's a clear example of this quote from Science and Health, the superiority of spiritual over physical power. Thanks for finding that, Betty. Putting that together with this story.
Yes.
Well, and obviously that there had to be something very receptive in him, in spite of the outward appearance of the devil, making him act like crazy and scaring everybody. But when he saw Jesus, what did he do?
He ran towards him.
Yeah, he cried out. He fell down before him. And with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God, Most High? I beseech thee, torment me not." That was the devil speaking.
Okay.
But this guy recognized who Jesus was. Maybe better than his disciples did, but...
Right. I think he was desiring the Christ. He was desiring to be free. Just this action.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. One thing we were taught here, if you have a demon in you, you're not going to want to be with a Christ conscious. Why?
It was a mental rebuke.
It is. There's something in you that knows there's something quite not right, and you don't want it exposed. It has you. It seems to have you. That's why if you can persist and not run, if you can stay with it and not run from the Christ, you'll have a healing. But if you run from it, then you won't.
And what is it that doesn't want the demon exposed?
Pride.
Thank you. Pride. You think you own this devil, and you're ashamed.
Now,
get over it.
It's very clear in this story, this demon was possessing this person, and that it was not him at all. It wasn't him. And that's where we have the authority to rebuke it. Rebuke it strongly. It's not person. It never is. Whatever stage it's in, if it's in the early stage or if it's in this extreme stage, it's never person. You can see it clearly in this story. Another point that was made by one of the commentaries, and I thought this was a very important point. It talks about, and I don't want to get off point entirely, but it talks about the townspeople. How did the townspeople treat Jesus?
They wanted to get rid of him.
They did. Why? Here he healed a guy.
He just sent 2,000 of their swine into the sea.
Yes, but
they probably didn't want it. They didn't want to change. They saw the power of this.
Exactly.
This commentary was very interesting because he said the people in the town actually had the same demon as that guy did. They didn't want to be exposed either. Why else would you send the Christ after you'd been healed? True, he got rid of all their pigs, and that was upsetting perhaps, but that was not the only reason. The reason was they all had a demon. They all had this error, to a lesser degree, but it was operating in them. And ultimately, who had the worst was those who shouted, "Crucify him!" This author of this commentary calls this an unholy fear. Unholy fear. Your fear is of what?
Change of the Christ or the...
Yes, it's afraid of God. It's afraid of the Christ. It's unholy. What's a holy fear then?
You don't want to offend God.
Be right. You want to obey God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So please make sure you're on the right side of that. If you find yourself afraid of God, wanting to avoid, that's what Ways That Are Vain are about, which Lawrence will read. You want to avoid God's people. If you want to avoid any exposure, you want to avoid the light, you've got an unholy fear. And the demon seems to have you by the tail. And you've got to make sure you let your deeds come to the light, get rid of your pride as hard as it can be. Anyone can be healed of this.
I just wanted to say, thinking about the 6,000, 6,000 voices of the Legion, and then also what Suzanne said about God good, thinking before I would encounter a situation and think, all right, I'm fearful about this, I better go online and check it out. And then in no time, I'd come across 6,000 human opinions about it. So now knowing just to say God good not only saves time, but it saves all that aggravation. So very grateful for that.
I just wanted to add before we went on that there seems to be a political correctness about demon, and people don't like that because they don't like you saying there's demons that need to be cast out. And I did a lot of work with children who had a lot of challenges, some emotional, and they had all kinds of medical diagnoses for these behaviors that I would say definitely look like demons. But they would be highly offended, and the intellectual human mind fights this idea, but, they better listen.
Well, thank you. And that goes back to what Suzanne was saying, too.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, finish.
I just want to add that while working with a practitioner at Plainfield, when I was in these classrooms, I saw these behaviors, which I would call demonic. I mean, they were often violent, destructive, and harmful to themselves and others, stop. And it only was when I had the work of the Plainfield practitioner. I worked with these kids for 15 years, and it was only when that Christ came into that classroom did I see this turnaround. No medication, no therapy, no human whatever. It was all Christ-based.
No niceness.
No niceness. Yes. And what do you want to say about Hitler? Was he just emotionally disturbed, or did he have a demon? I mean, some of these things that have gone on are people possessed. I didn't know this. I've talked about it at the round table before, but there's now proof that he was into witchcraft and other things like that. If it had been handled in that way, perhaps it would have been destroyed sooner. But you're right. If you mention demons, everyone is going to, run out the door. So we don't mention it, but that doesn't mean we don't understand it and handle it, because that's what it is. And being nice to it, or years and years of therapy and talking about it, that's not going to do it.
We're trying to medicate it away.
No, that's not going to do it. You've got to see it for what it is and realize it's no source, no cause, no law, no substance. It's not of God. God never said it. And bring that healing Christ wherever it's needed. People were afraid of the Christ. They were afraid of Mrs. Eddy because she challenged the status quo. Did she not? People didn't want to hear it. They cling to their tatters. It can be very frustrating at times when you're, dealing with someone who doesn't seem to want to change, right?
Right.
Thank you, Mark. Mrs. Eddy says they cling to their tatters. Sometimes, if that's that person, you'll have to leave them for a while.
But you have to be decisive with the error. You cannot leave the error in limbo or with any wiggle room. You have to be totally decisive. And Mrs. Evans used to say, if you've got someone that is in that kind of a state, the prayer is, God, heal it or remove it. Be prepared to have it removed, one way or the other. But the error has to go, and it has to go first in your own consciousness. And when your consciousness is clear, trust me, the error will know it. And it will go one way or the other.
I was thinking about the allegory in this thing, just saying to leave the people. Keep going.
Thank you.
I'd like to cite an example that I read in the periodicals when I used to subscribe to them. This is about, I guess, 4 years ago. It was an interview with a Christian Science practitioner who gave an account of attending, she thought, a dinner theater with friends and her husband. But when she got there, they had changed the program, and a hypnotist was on the program. And her husband was just coming into science, and she thought, oh, this is great. What's going on here? So immediately she started working before the hypnotist came out and knew, without a doubt, there was one mind. And other things that she said, I can't recall right now, but the hypnotist came out and he said, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but I cannot go on with my show tonight. There's a Christian Scientist in this audience, and it's prohibiting me from doing my act. I thought that was very telling.
There you are. And there are many examples Mrs. Eddy knew. If there was someone like that in her audience, she would work. There was someone there once sitting working against her, and she knew it. She mentally addressed it and left or ceased. So that is, let's be aware of it. Mrs. Eddy also said you could tell a person who was under it by their eyes. She said their eyes are dead. They look dead. Mrs. Evans used to very often address demons. She could see it. I can see it in a person. Their eyes. In the urban, I'm going to freak people out here, but the Urban Dictionary, this was a poem, said, when you feel my heat, look into my eyes. It's where my demons hide. It's where my demons hide. Don't get too close. It's dark inside. It's where my demons hide. It's where my demons hide. So you can know if someone is being handled by something, and you only know it to protect yourself. If this is, again, radiation of absorption, you're absorbing. That's why we need to radiate. In these articles that I was reading, they were saying demons seem to have a possession. They have to have someone to be in order to exist. Else, how could they exist? So you have to know what it is, how to protect yourself and defend it, and let it. Where were these demons sent?
Into the swine.
Yes, and where did the swine go?
Into the lake. Into the lake.
Into the abyss, which is just where it did not want to go. And that is referred to in Revelation. A lake of fire and a night without a star. That's where they get sent. And that's how we send them. And that's their utter, final destruction. You don't fool with it. I was telling Gary, and I haven't said this to many people, but there was a time in the church, sort of more at the end, when I felt that there were demons in the church, and that they were trying to hop around and take people out. An insidious voice, and I remember I could see it in people's eyes. I knew who was and who wasn't. And because of that, I was able to handle it and to defend myself from it. And I was right, because the ones, and I tried to help all of them as best I could, but the ones who wouldn't listen did leave. And in the cases where there would appear to be demons, it was not a good picture. I'm not saying this to try to freak you out, but I'm just saying it's something, and ignoring it or pretending it doesn't exist is not how you do it. You've got to be aware of it. It's probably why I'm still here.
It is definitely why she is still here. And it is definitely why those of us who are still here are still here. because the demons will come. They will try. And they will try those of you who are the most useful to God the hardest. And it will try through someone close to you. But when you recognize the demon and you see it as impersonal, you have no choice but to see it destroyed. Because it's opposed to God. It's not a personal thing, it's an offense to God. It's that simple. And because it's an offense to God, it has no power of its own. The only seeming power it has is if you give it some. If you attach it to a person and take it personally, it's got you. So don't.
That's why there's so much talk about the personal sense. Personal sense. First edition is full of personal sense because that's what it attaches itself to, your personal sense of self. And those voices, and especially when you start out wanting to work for God or, use your science and help mankind, it'll come. Oh, you don't even believe it. Why? You don't want to be around this group, or it comes. This voice, insidious. Barnes is going to read about it. And that's what we call animal magnetism. You can call it a demon, you can call it error, you can call it Satan, you can call it all different names.
But it's all mortal mind. The belief, mortal mind, that there is a mind other than God.
Ultimately, it is all nothing. That little story about you have a zero, it stays nothing, it stays a zero. You've got to put a number in front of it to make it something. So watch out for those voices. Don't listen to them.
Something that struck me about the story was that the demons chose, I think, what they thought was an escape route, which ultimately led to their complete destruction in the swine. And the interesting thing to me was that the owners were so offended at losing the swine, but that was not really something that the Jewish people were supposed to be raising in those days.
Well, that's right. My understanding is this was Gentile country, the area of the Gentiles. But yeah, they were upset at losing so much swine. It seems like a bad thing to happen to the swine. But I guess, and it didn't just, fortunately, the swine destroyed themselves. The era destroyed itself. It has to destroy itself. So these lessons and these stories are deep ones, and I feel that we are being trained now to handle these deeper issues because they plague our country. Whether it calls itself this, as Dan started out with mental illness and all these troubles we're having, or whether it calls these disaster storms, we as scientists are going to have to know how to handle it. And you can practice and build up your strength because you're going to hear about it and see it in your everyday life. You will either ignore it or pretend it doesn't exist or be afraid of it, or you will apply the truths that you're given here and grow stronger for it. You will become a metaphysician, which you all are becoming, and it pleases me no end. And we will get where we can speak to it. And don't be discouraged if it doesn't just go away in a flash. You just keep working at it. It wants you to be discouraged. It wants you to stop. What have we to do with thee? Leave us alone. But you don't stop. Now, the last question was about, well, what did Jesus tell the man to do? He wanted to follow him, which showed he really got it. But he was told to what?
Go back.
Return to thine own house.
Tell it in them.
So, just
show me an example of what? And help these other people who have a degree in them. What, fairly?
Well, it's God's power to tell about how God was powerful in his light, and he did it. He stayed and he did it.
Did it. Stayed in his own country. So must we stay where we are and work out the issues. Are there any comments or questions before we go to ways that are vain? Eddie?
I think we covered pretty much all the questions.
I think we did too.
Yeah.
Okay,
I love this.
Okay, go ahead, Dale.
I love this one thing I read in Matthew Henry. Let us give our hearts to God, for we are never more our own than when we are His.
Beautiful. Yes. And that keeps you safe and free. And when you have a holy fear of Him, that means that you disobey Him. But if you're feeling you're ever afraid of Him or you don't want to be with God's people, well, that's error talking, trying to get you in its clutches. You can see by that man where it'll lead you.
And there was another quote by Matthew Henry. Those under Christ's government are sweetly led with bands of love. Those under the devil's government are furiously driven.
Very good.
Yeah.
See someone driven. You know, Mr. Evans used to ask me, what's driving you? It's not God, and it wasn't God in those days. Fear, with selfishness, with other things. That's the demon. Only I didn't know. I didn't know that's what was driving me. Don't let anything drive you. Be led by the Christ Spirit.
On Peter and Faith CD, there's a song that talks about this, isn't there? I was trying to be what others thought I should be, and I tried this and I tried that, and I was miserable. But when I found God, I found me. One of my favorite songs.
True for all of us. When we find God, we find peace. And that's the truth. And anyone under addiction or under this lie of mental illness has the right to be free. And the freedom is, as Luann said, you shall know this truth, and it will make you free. Read Science and Health. Read what Eddie says. Read the Bible in an understanding way, looking at the spiritual meaning, and it will free you. Wonderful. All power. Lauren.
Yes.
Ways that are vain.
Yes, ways that are vain. It's in miscellany. Page 210 it starts from. Certain individuals entertain the notion that Christian Science mind healing should be two-sided and only denounce error in general, saying nothing in particular of error that is damning men. They are sticklers for a false, convenient peace, straining at gnats and swallowing camels. The unseen wrong to individuals and society they are too cowardly, too ignorant, or too wicked to uncover and excuse themselves by denying that this evil exists. This mistaken way of hiding sin in order to maintain harmony has licensed evil, allowing it first to smolder and then break out in devouring flames. All that error asks is to be let alone, even as in Jesus' time the unclean spirits cried out, "Let us alone. What have we to do with thee?" Animal magnetism, in its ascending steps of evil, entices its victim by unseen, silent arguments. Reversing the mote of good in their silent allurement to health and holiness, it impels mortal mind into error of thought and tempts into the committal of acts foreign to the natural inclinations. The victims lose their individuality and lend themselves as willing tools to carry out the designs of their worst enemies, even those who would induce their self-destruction. Animal magnetism fosters suspicious distrust where honor is due, fear where courage should be strongest, reliance where there should be avoidance, a belief in safety where there is most danger. And these miserable lies, poured constantly into his mind, fret and confuse it, spoiling that individual's disposition, undermining his health, and sealing his doom unless the cause of the mischief is found out and destroyed. Other minds are made dormant by it, and the victim is in a state of semi-individuality, with a mental haziness which admits of no intellectual culture or spiritual growth. The state induced by this secret evil influence is a species of intoxication in which the victim is led to believe and do what he would never otherwise think or do voluntarily. This intricate method of animal magnetism is the essence or spirit of evil which makes mankind drunken. In this era, it is taking the place of older and more open sins and other forms of intoxication. A harder fight will be necessary to expose the cause and effects of this evil influence than has been required to put down the evil effects of alcohol. The alcoholic habit is the use of higher forms of matter wherewith to do evil, whereas animal magnetism is the highest form of mental evil wherewith to complete the sum total of sin. The question is often asked, why is there so much dissension among mental practitioners? We answer, because they do not practice in strict accordance with the teaching of Christian Science mind healing. If they did, there would be unity of action. Being like the disciples of old, with one accord in one place, they would receive a spiritual influx impossible under other conditions, and so would recognize and resist the animal magnetism by which they are being deceived and misled. The mental malpractitioner, interfering with the rights of mind, destroys the true sense of science and loses his own power to heal. He tries to compensate himself with his own loss by hindering in every way conceivable the success of others. You will find this practitioner saying that animal magnetism never troubles him, but that Mrs. Eddy teaches animal magnetism. That he says this to cover, and he says this to cover his crime of mental malpractice in furtherance of unscrupulous designs. The natural fruits of Christian Science mind healing are harmony, brotherly love, spiritual growth, and activity. The malicious aim of perverted mind power or animal magnetism is to paralyze good and give activity to evil. It starts factions and engenders envy and hatred, but as activity is by no means a right of evil and its emissaries, they ought not to be encouraged in it. Because this age is cursed with one rancorous and lurking foe to human's weal, those who are truest friends of mankind and conscientious in their desire to do right and to live pure and Christian lives should be more zealous to do good, more watchful and vigilant. Then they will be proportionately successful and bring out glorious results. Unless one's eyes are open to the modes of mental practice, working so subtly that we mistake its suggestions for the impulses of our own thought, the victim will allow himself to drift in the wrong direction without knowing it. Be ever on guard against this enemy. Watch your thoughts and see whether they lead you to God and into harmony with His true followers. Guard and strengthen your own citadel more strongly. Thus you will grow wiser and better through every attack of your foe, and the golden rule will not rust for lack of use or be misrepresented by the adverse influence of animal magnetism. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, one of the commentaries was saying, well, we don't know how these demons get started. That's how, okay? That is a total explanation. Guard your thinking. We have all power over it. And so, wonderful. What's the matter? That's the matter. Okay, well,
I have in it a personalized section of it, making it your own, so I think I sent it before, Mary, didn't I?
Yeah.
The one that, yes.
It's how you talk to yourself about it. This is a chapter that we were taught to study often in this church. It's so important. And the one before it, what our leader says, that's the positive of it, about keeping your mind so full of life, truth, and love, that there's no room for error to enter. So radiate, don't absorb, and have a good rest of your day. We'll see you tonight for our watch. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
Yes, thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you.
Thank you.